We shot for 50 nights in rain most times. We were outside. Kind of miserable to make, but it holds its own, and it is a remarkable film. I like any cut without the voiceover.
Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Wednesday, July 30th, 2025. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York. Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. In today's episode, we'll talk with senior entertainment writer Angelique Jackson on her cover story with none other than Harrison Ford. It's a fantastic read, published today in print and online. She shares a lot of observations that add insight to her portrait of this incredible movie star. After that, business editor Todd Spangler catches us up on the status of the cable TV divorces that are in progress at NBCUniversal and Warner Bros. Discovery. But before we get to that, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. Big congrats to Ted Danson and Mary Steenburgen. The Television Academy will honor the couple with its Bob Hope Humanitarian Award. It'll be presented at the Emmy Awards on September 14th. Together and separately, they are national treasures. The debut of Adam Sandler's Happy Gilmore 2 logged record viewership for Netflix. The sequel logged nearly 50 million views on its opening weekend. And just like Adam Sandler, Jane Austen has still got it. Netflix unveiled the first look at its Pride and Prejudice limited series adaptation. And based on the number of people who flocked to Variety.com to look at that picture, there is a lot of anticipation for this British production. And because seemingly everything is fodder for limited series, there are rumblings that Starz and Lionsgate TV are working on a project revolving the gambling scandal that snared Shohei Ohtani. Last year, it emerged that the longtime interpreter for the Japanese Dodgers superstar had embezzled some $17 million from Ohtani to support his gambling habit. Now we turn to conversations with Variety journalists about news and trends in show business. Here's Angelique Jackson talking about her very big get, a sit-down with Harrison Ford. That was Ford you heard in the cold open to this episode, talking about his experience making the original Blade Runner. Angelique Jackson, thank you for joining me. I am so excited to talk to you for our cover story segment this week.
It was truly an honor and a privilege.
Privilege is a good word. You had the privilege of sitting down with none other than Harrison Ford for a wide-ranging, career-spanning interview on the occasion of his first ever Emmy nomination. Angelique, tell me everything. What is Harrison Ford like at this moment in his life?
I will say that walking into the Apple offices in Culver City and finding Harrison Ford in a tuxedo at 11 o'clock in the morning on a Monday really is quite the way to start off a week. You don't often get a chance to see legends like that ever, really. What I will say is really interesting was that it kind of was like Clark Kent turning into Superman a little bit, because Harrison walked in with a cup of black coffee in hand. He was wearing this like olive green sweater, his glasses, and then next thing you know, he's in this tuxedo and becomes Harrison Ford. As soon as that camera was on him, every single take was of movie star quality. Being able to talk broadly about his career really appeals to him right now. Obviously, he is at this point of his 70 plus year on-screen career where there's a lot to look back on, but oftentimes he's focused on talking about the big hits. So Star Wars, Indiana Jones. Maybe he'll get to talk about Blade Runner in large part because he played that role again. But he rarely gets a chance to, play the deep cuts. He rarely gets a chance to talk about Witness or some of his earlier roles like American Graffiti or Apocalypse Now. So he seemed to have a lot of fun with the idea of looking back on it all. But something that really struck me just in general was something that he said about acting. And from the very beginning, when he was a college student and decided this is what he wanted to be, the thing that he loved about it was that it actually allowed him to hide. Where other people, they really felt like they were being their full, true selves by being actors. Acting allowed him the opportunity to kind of hide himself in parts of these characters. he is never really like playing Harrison Ford. And he was very specific about that, Paul in Shrinking is not Harrison. There are little parts of him that are in these characters, but he actually kind of uses this opportunity to create a little bit of distance between himself and the people he's embodying.
He's always juggled multiple major franchises, so he's never completely pigeonholed. He's been Indiana Jones, yes, but he'll also be doing something very different in another venue. For the uninitiated, explain Know Your Lines and explain how it went, because it is a bit of a game, and it sounds like the game loosened him up for you.
I did appreciate just how game Harrison was to dive into this. So Know Their Lines is this game that we play where we give the subject a line from a movie they were in. They're supposed to guess what the movie is and then give a couple of recollections about the project. Sometimes it's a very obvious line. I mean, honestly, two of the most iconic words in cinema, I know. Harrison Ford knows that he said that as Han Solo in Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, in large part because he ad-libbed that line and it made history himself.
Oh, you're trying to make it too easy for me. I know. Carrie Fisher said to me, I love you. And I was supposed to say, I love you too. And I thought that was a little un-Han Solo-ish. I thought it was a little banal. So I said, no.
I love you.
I know.
But then when you give him one like the line that we chose from Witness, he needed a few hints to get there to figure out which one it was. He even joked, he was like, are you sure I said that? And because, of course, we had watched the movie rather like the night before, I could confirm you did in fact say this line.
If you're going to play Know Your Lines with Harrison Ford, you better have done your homework.
Amen to that. And we also got to have lots of fun with moments like we talk about Blade Runner. He talked about how difficult it was to shoot the first movie, but how much fun he had shooting the second movie, including when, of course, he famously punched Ryan Gosling in the face on accident. So we got to have a little bit of fun there.
I also appreciated that you drew him out. American Graffiti is a great example. He intersected with that very, very fertile time in LA when you had George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, Francis Ford Coppola, John Milius, like this world of directors that were just coming into their own, and they were going to define movie making in the 70s and 80s. And I just love that you got him to reflect on being part of that moment. Was there a point when the conversation took a turn that surprised you?
Perhaps what was the most surprising about him was that there was a difference between our video interview and the print interview. He obviously is a bit more gregarious on camera. This is someone that is truly, one of our great faces of cinema. But then when we were sitting down, he's a very, very thoughtful interviewee. He really takes his time to think out and really listen to your questions. I mean, it's not a surprise. He's a respectful subject, but I think it's more of a surprise just how truly thoughtful each and every response is, whether it be short or long. If he's just going to tell you no, he's not doing something, there's a lot of thought between why he's saying that and what he's choosing to say there.
You mentioned that he liked acting because it gave him a place to hide. And I thought it was very interesting last year that he made the very bold decision to go on camera and, as Harrison Ford, give his full-throated endorsement to Kamala Harris with some real urgency. That seemed to be a departure for him. What was your sense in talking to him about his decision to endorse Kamala in that very public way, and whether he's felt any repercussions from that?
His initial response to the question of how he feels about making that video now, he gave me one word as the response: fine. I think there was also something to be said of the idea, and he gets into it later in the answer, that he did what he felt was right in the moment.
Angelique, I want to commend you. You did not have a lot of time to prepare for this, and boy, did you knock it out of the park for us. Folks, you've got to find it online. Get your print edition. It's published Wednesday. I will not spoil it, but I loved your last question, and I loved his answer.
I loved having the opportunity, and especially because Shrinking is so much fun. Thank you.
These days in TV, it's hard to tell the players without a scorecard. Here, Todd Spangler catches us up on all that is happening with Versant, the cable channel spinoff of NBC Universal, and Discovery Global, which will be the home of CNN, TNT, TBS, Discovery, Food Network, HGTV, and other linear channels that had been part of Warner Bros. Discovery. All of the movement is a big sign of where the money is and isn't going in pay TV. Todd Spangler, thanks for joining me.
Hello.
The assignment here is to step back and see the forest for the trees. And as we know, there are two very similar processes going on right now. For NBC Universal and for Warner Bros. Discovery, both companies are in the process of separating out from most of their traditional linear cable channels. This really gives us almost like a petri dish of looking at where the television business is, where the biggest companies see the opportunity. Todd, you've been covering every inch of this. What you've covered on this process told you about the dynamics of the television business right now.
Other than the logistics of actually making this separation, which are not insignificant, the challenges are what really is the future for each of these independent companies. They want to tell investors that there is a potential growth play here. It will, give them the freedom to make some strategic decisions, potentially some strategic M&A. We might see a recombination of the companies that are in the space and try to get a more diversified revenue stream. But that's really the challenge is like, how do you diversify from the melting ice cube that is pay TV, which is really the bulk of their revenue?
We've been shouting this now for almost a decade, but the erosion of cable earnings is going to really change Hollywood. And I would say here in 2025, we are in the thick of that change.
Yep, here it is.
Let's talk about the practical concerns about separating such a big chunk of the company like NBC Universal, USA Network, Sci-Fi, MSNBC, CNBC. These are not insignificant brands under that umbrella. And so it's everything from the biggest picture of who's going to be the CEO to where is everybody going to sit. Catch us up on kind of the practicalities of NBC Universal's spinoff, which is expected to be completed by year's end, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right. They're aiming for the end of 2025. So they picked some office space. They're going to move out of 30 Rock, although, CNBC was already in New Jersey, a big operation over there. It's essentially like you've got de-synergies in doing something like this, where you've got to replicate the infrastructure that has supported the merged companies. So you need new HR department, you need to staff up your finance department. And so, just as an example, you need a new CFO. They picked some of those people and they've hired now Tom Rogers, as you know, from the NBC cable days and the earliest cable days. He helped launch MSNBC and CNBC. So they've brought him on as a senior advisor to help steer them into their new skin, as it were.
When I saw the Tom Rogers news, I thought they were definitely hiring Tom for his Rolodex as somebody who launched some very foundational cable channels. He's still got a lot of pull in that world. It seems like, as you say, reverse synergies, a little bit of a ray of hope in hiring for mid-level white-collar TV executives, because it has been a bloodbath of layoffs in this area the last couple of years. So it is interesting to see people emerge like Rebecca Campbell, formerly a senior person in Disney TV and Disney International, is on the board of Versant. So just when it seemed like hiring was pretty bleak, there is some movement. They have some real leadership challenges because by definition, they're kind of in a grow or die from day one situation.
It's not that the business is losing money. It's profitable, right? It's just not growing as fast as it had been. And the new streaming era, basically, you don't see those 30, 40% margins that you saw in the heyday of cable TV. So it's a different financial profile. And that's part of the thesis here, is that you're going to present a company that has a certain financial growth aspect. And for a certain class of investors, that's great. It's going to produce consistent profits, but it's going to shrink unless they find some other way to either recombine with other cable networks or find another way to get into the larger media ecosystem. But yeah, on day one for these companies, the goal is going to be to make sure you're running a tight ship and you got all of the processes and people that you need to keep these things going, and that the wheels don't fall off as the separations happen.
It'll be interesting to see what comes from these companies because there's a definite lack of pizzazz around traditional cable. So they're going to have to do something. And how, with that economic base, how do you compete with, let's say, Disney and FX doing Alien Earth that cost a whole lot of money? I know these are unanswerable questions, but very interesting to watch. Anything else in particular, Todd, that you're watching for in this process that you think will be telling about the future of both of these spin-off companies?
One wild card to keep an eye on is what sort of regulatory hoops may be introduced here. I don't think Warner Bros. Discovery or NBCUniversal are expecting any serious regulatory problems here, but we don't really know how that'll all shake out just yet.
As we know, these are highly unprecedented times right now in Washington, so that's a very good note of caution. Well, Todd, thank you as ever for tracking all these moves day by day and giving us the big picture too. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
As we close out today's episode, here are a few things we're watching for. The Directors Guild of America has set the negotiating committee for its upcoming contract talks covering broadcast network news, sports, operations, and local broadcasting. At this point, we're probably only weeks away from the first stirrings of activity from unions on the broader film and TV negotiations to happen next year. Bradley Cooper's latest directorial effort, Is This Thing On?, has been set as the closing night film for the New York Film Festival on October 10th. The Searchlight picture, described as a dramatic comedy, stars Will Arnett and Laura Dern. Comcast reports its second quarter earnings on Thursday. We'll be on it before the sun comes up in LA. Before we go, congrats to Flora Kelly. She's been promoted to Senior VP of ESPN Research. She's been with the worldwide leader since 2006. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Angelique Jackson and Todd Spangler. It was edited by Aaron Greenwald. Sticks, nicks, hick, picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice, and please tune in tomorrow for another episode of Daily Variety.
I was under contract to Columbia Pictures at the time for $150 a week, and all the respect that implies. I was called into the office of the head of the new talent program, and he told me that I had no future in the business, which was okay. He wanted me to change my name. He thought that Harrison Ford was too pretentious a name for a young man. And then he asked me to get my hair cut like Elvis Presley.